First review of the show, we have The Flash, a movie with absolutely zero controversy about Barry Allen. This movie is kind of like the last breath of the Snyderverse. You know, of course, it's a era of film that is going to be talked about long throughout history, about a movie franchise that has tried to compete with Marvel, tried to do its own thing, but also tried to keep it all connected until eventually this past year it got announced that James Gunn was taking over as the CEO of DC Films. And this movie is going to be the swan song of this cinematic universe. This film featuring Barry Allen going back in time to save his mother, an adaptation of the classic Jeff Johns story Flashpoint, that film that's been adapted in an animated film called The Flashpoint Paradox, as well as on CW's The Flash. And utilizing all those different elements of DC, utilizing this very odd cinematic universe that was the Snyderverse. What did you guys think of this when it was first announced?
When it was first announced, I've been convinced up until maybe 4 months ago that it didn't exist. It was just a psyop that they showed Tom Cruise, Stephen King, and James Gunn. It just weirdly has like the longest production history ever. I believe even longer than the gap between Avatar 1 and Avatar 2.
I think it was first announced back around the press tour for 2016 when Batman v Superman was announced. And they announced this whole slate of a cinematic universe that was meant to like compete with Marvel. And The Flash was going to be one of the first projects after Justice League. Right. But, you know, various problems happened during development. At one point, basically, you could list off a who's who of great directors now. And at one point, they were attached to direct The Flash. I mean, Phil Lord and Chris Miller were attached to this at some point. Jonathan Goldstein and John Francis Daly, who are the credited story writers for this, who would go on to direct Game Night and Dungeons & Dragons. They were attached to direct this. Seth Grahame-Smith was attached as his directorial debut. Rick Famuyiwa, Travis Knight. Who's who was attached to direct this. And through various different complications, this movie almost never saw the light of day. For a long time, The Flash was basically this almost boogeyman of a film that would have never seen the light of day.
And, you know, you got to just think, it's a movie about a guy who runs fast. And we exist in a world where, like, Batman's utility belt will get a 5-part HBO Max series. So for The Flash to seem like it could never be made seemed to be strange, but I just assumed the whole thing was doomed, plus with the lead up to it. And, you know, you'll just hear things like Ben Affleck returning as Batman. I'm like, didn't he just say in an interview that week that he would rather drink himself to death or something along those lines? You know, I mean, think I'm conflating the two, or was about to.
I mean, he said that he would drink himself to death if he had to direct a Batman movie.
Which, I mean, he made his best attempt, and he started drinking himself to death because of all the stress, and they wouldn't let him do what he wanted to do. And he seemed to have actually a pretty good script of what he wanted to do and how he's going to do it, and just the many different studios, the many different visions trying to fight him. He just gave up. Said, screw it.
Well, I remember the direct quote on that.
He retreated right into Ana de Armas's bed.
Yeah.
Well, I remember the direct quote that he said about the script, and he said, like, I handed it to a friend of mine. He said, this is a really good script. I think if you direct this, you will drink yourself to death. That was the quote.
Yeah.
But yeah. Weirdly enough, kind of just saying an earlier thought on it. Watching Ben Affleck as Batman for like the first 7 minutes of this movie, I was like, oh, we kind of were robbed of a Batfleck movie.
I wouldn't say that, because for me, there's way too much baggage for Ben Affleck's take on the character. And I liked what I saw in both versions of Justice League and in various appearances that he's had as Bruce Wayne in this this cinematic universe. But I thought for as tumultuous as his journey as the character has been, it was nice to see him go out on this high note, because that is one of the better sequences in this movie, is seeing Batfleck's mentorship of Barry Allen, seeing their dynamic and how it's developed since whichever version of Justice League you decide is canon. I mean, I think they name drop him traveling back in time, which was the canon ending in the Snyder Cut.
Yeah, I believe they've just full on said the Snyder Cut is canon, because I think they realized that the other one was made very shoddily.
Yeah.
Not to give too much praise to the Snyder Cut, but it's a little more coherent.
It's not as much of a Frankenstein's monster of a movie as the theatrical cut of Justice League was.
Yeah.
My take on that Justice League movie was always, I remember seeing it on a Saturday morning. I remember kind of enjoying some parts of it, but it felt like a Cronenberg monster that came out of a portal and screamed out, "Kill me," while also being somewhat entertaining.
Which is exactly how it went. It was a Frankenstein's monster of a bad situation that the studio abused and hired another complete director. And you can tell the moments where he came in. But the funny thing about that, too, is if they just released the movie, maybe in like a 3-hour cut version, it probably would have done better than if they never interfered at all, because the stuff he cut, he then re-added, which just bloated it even further. If he just let it lean and just cut out a lot of the crap, but you could have cut it down to a 3-hour version. And I think people would have been fine with it. But regardless of that, this Flash movie has, even earlier than that, a Flash movie has been in plans since the late 80s. It's been in and out since the 2014. It wasn't until 2014 that, like, you know what, we're going to be making part of a cinematic universe. And then that's where all that just back and forth. So this movie already had a lot of a mountain to get over.
And it was even before that, where I think in 2013, when season 2 of Arrow debuted, they announced that they were going to have Barry Allen be a character on season 2 of Arrow. And that was eventually going to backdoor pilot into a season of The Flash, where, if that didn't go well, The Flash was going to be a supporting character on Arrow. But here we are 10 seasons later.
Arguably, Flash season 1 and Arrow seasons 1 and 2 are basically the best that they've ever made. And it all went downhill pretty soon after that. That's a whole other topic. I don't even want to get into it.
That is a whole other topic that is going to be best saved for a spoiler discussion on this movie, along with DC Studios as a whole. But The Flash, the film, starts with Barry Allen discovering that he has the power to run so fast that he can break the time barrier, travel back in time, and affect history. And if you remember reading a Flash comic or watching either version of it, you know that Barry's father is sitting in prison accused of the murder of his mother. And Barry goes back in time to save her. But in doing so, changes history, alters reality completely, creates a world with no metahumans. So it's on him to recruit this universe's Batman and Supergirl in order to stop the threat of the Flash's greatest enemy, General Zod.
Yeah.
I think it's worth mentioning as far as just the initial hook for the movie. A big reason why there is this pressure to go back to save their mom is that things have escalated in the relationship with the case against their father. He's enlisted the help of Bruce Wayne, who used all of his resources and found no alibi for him that day. And the Flash's life is pretty much sucking. And also happenstances force Barry Allen to be stuck a little bit further in the past than they wanted to be.
Yeah. If you've guessed from so Ezra Miller is a non-binary actor. They use the pronouns they, them, but the character that they play is Barry Allen, so it's he, him. So it's it's a delicate tightrope to dance.
But also there are two Barrys, so they.
Yeah, so they applies. So, in doing so and traveling back in time, they interact with a past version of Barry Allen. So, and for as wonky as the CG effects get in this movie, the effect of the two Barrys is kind of seamless, especially because not that long ago it was very impressive that we got to see in something like The Social Network with two Army Hammers. And here it's just as seamless. It's like not even just them having them play the same person with the same face, but just change the wig and have them in different clothes in the same scene. It's like both versions of Barry Allen are interacting extensively in a way that is very hard to pull off convincingly. But the scene was never broken for me.
I'm curious, just as sort of cold thoughts. Theater lights go up. How did y'all feel at the end of this movie?
Theater lights go up at the end of this movie.
I'm saying just at the end, you watched the movie. What was your initial reaction?
My initial reaction after watching this movie, I felt like how people who love pop culture, but I felt like the people who walked out of Ready Player One. I felt like I was just fed an endless slew of Easter eggs and cameos and deep cuts that were meant to appeal to nobody except the very, very, very deepest of Kevin Smith of nerds, meant to draw out the most stale of applause in effects that were rendered on a Nintendo GameCube that you bought at a flea market from a guy that also sells fake Jordans and puppies out of the same van.
Damn.
Dusk?
I'm not as harsh as that, but I do feel as soon as the lights went up, I thought, well, that was a waste of time.
That's fair. So I saw it about 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
Fair enough.
I've had a long time to think about, deliberate, all of that. And it's a tense experience sitting in the theater. Lights go up, looking at each other. Everybody there said, that was pretty good. And I've not wavered on it. I have pretty uncomplicated feelings on this movie. I've since had the take that people were like, well, that's just fucking bait. That this is No Way Home but good.
I like No Way Home way more than this.
That's fair. It is a very likable movie. But yeah. No. I was just sort of curious where y'all left with it. What did y'all like about this?
Okay, so a couple things. Yeah, so just to get down to the nitty gritty of the things I liked about this, for as controversial as Ezra Miller is as a person, as a performer, and as both versions of Barry Allen in this film, I thought for what they're given, I think they are doing a fantastic job of portraying this character in a way that they haven't really been given the room to in previous iterations. Like with both versions of Justice League, I felt like this was a Barry Allen that was very emotionally complex, that was going through the emotional ringer, and all of the emotional scenes with him and his parents. I thought all of those worked really well. I really love seeing Michael Keaton back in the cowl again, even though this is essentially basically just a paycheck role for Michael Keaton. And I've said this before, Michael Keaton's sleepwalking is better than most actors at their Jeremy Strongest.
Yeah.
And he is absolutely phenomenal. He commands the screen. It is cool seeing his take on Batman and also getting to see the improvements that you get with not just a better suit, but with a better cinematography, because you get this iconic version of this character that is also able to fight on screen in a way that you wish he could have with out the limitations of the early costume. Sasha Kaye, I think she is fantastic as Kara Zor-El. She reminded me a lot of the character that I read reading Tom Taylor's Woman of Tomorrow. And I think that she is fantastic. She is given a criminal amount. She is criminally underused in this movie. And if they announce that she is reprising her role in the announced Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, I would applaud, because I think she is a performer that deserves another chance at this character with more meat to chew on.
Yeah.
No, I'm just sort of curious because I feel like I kind of buried the lead on my liking of this movie, Dusk. How did you feel about it?
Look,
as far as good aspects, and we'll get into the bad.
To the positive.
Yeah. All right. No, I'm trying to be. I always try to come with the positive first. I think overall, I think the music tone is good. I think overall there's good cues here. I like that even if it's cheap, I do appreciate that they do musical cues that represent characters. That's actually a fairly important usage of characters, is the theme that they create and like to it. I thought, again, Michael Keaton. I think even when he sleepwalked through a performance, I'm just like, can I just watch the movie for you? I don't really care about anything else. I would rather, like, it's basically the entire time I was like, yeah, what would a lazy Batman be like when he's just not doing anything? Even if this is stupid, this is on the levels of Teen Titans Go or something really dumb.
Like as Batman for a while.
You know, yeah. You know, I mean,
what?
Not calling him lazy. It's just more tired.
We have the George Clooney Batman.
Which
is just a Batman that's coming down from cocaine, I'm guessing.
True. You know what? I'll say this as well. I'll get him out of the way real quickly, because unfortunately, like a lot in this movie, there are moments I could have wanted, but I didn't get enough of. I actually liked Ben Affleck as the brief moments of Batman. For like the last moment he's ever going to play this damn character, he finally gets a moment to be like, this is what Batman represents, and scars are who we are, and it's just what we do with them matters. And he's actually being a reasonable human being and actually talking from the heart. And you understand, like, wow, beneath he's a broken guy, but he understands what he's doing, at least in the aspect of what his pain is, and he's trying to instill that camaraderie with Barry, and he understands him from a point of view.
Yeah, it felt like a version of the character that I wanted to see in films like BVS or Justice League. Right, the character that you are selling me that this is a Batman who has been doing this for a majority of his adult life. And he is still acting like he's fresh out the cowl. He is still like horrifically murdering criminals left and right. And he is just a very closed off person. And here it feels like it's a natural progression of that, especially having worked with Superman, having worked with the entire Justice League, and realizing his mistakes and trying to not lead a character like Barry down that same road.
Right. Again, if this was the version of Batman we got, a more grizzled version, tired a bit more, but willing to work with everyone but instilling bits of wisdom here and there, I think he would have been much better accepted. And I always thought Ben Affleck actually had a natural way of doing the character. It's just that he had nothing to chew on, and it's kind of bittersweet seeing him end that character for all extensive purposes here. And knowing what you could have had and be like, oh,
well, it's the most complex take that we've gotten on the character.
Yes,
just for him, because Snyder always, and I know the people who love Snyder will defend him to death, and that's
go right ahead.
I've made my peace with that. I think Snyder always loses sight of whatever big ideas he has with a character in favor of the character looking cool,
of the spectacle.
And this movie has that, and also has the world-weary aspect that Affleck brings, and the movie star persona that he brings to his later supporting roles, which have all been pretty stellar lately.
It was like, if you go back the last 5 years, there hasn't been a Ben Affleck role that I haven't liked, at least.
Yeah. I'll even mention this about Kara. She's not the interpretation of the Kara I kind of wanted necessarily. I do think I wouldn't have necessarily chosen for it, But I thought for what she was given, I actually think she did a pretty solid job as an interpretation of the more warrior-minded Kara that we later see in. That is a much more differential of. I mean, a lot of people mistake Kara as like, oh, she's just female Superman. I'm like, no, actually, she's actually had a character very distinct from Superman for a long time.
Yeah,
they just don't.
Yeah, the perception of Kara Zor-El, I think, is very warped by the movie that came out in the 90s that.
Or in the 80s.
To very,
excuse
me, in the 80s, the mid 80s, excuse me, to very mixed reception. And also, as much as I liked parts of it, the CW Supergirl show, because they very much just gender swapped Clark Kent.
Yeah.
But in comics, and especially in some later runs like Tom Taylor's Woman of Tomorrow, Kara's a much more complicated character because she grew up on Krypton. She does not have that same connection to humanity that Clark does.
Yeah. In a lot of ways, she hates humans and resents them.
Yeah, and when Sasha Kaye gets to chew on some of that and get to showcase some of that, I thought she was spectacular, and I'm really upset that she didn't get more to do.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, this movie is not called Supergirl. This movie is called The Flash, and I've said this before about other projects that have briefly showcased other characters from other projects. But at the end of the day, this movie is about The Flash.
Right.
Despite what all of the marketing would have you believe.
Pretty much.
That was one of the things to get into positives, what I really enjoyed about the movie was that it was an honest to God Flash movie. I was shocked. That was the biggest shock of the entire movie outside of a few cameos. Where I was just sitting around like, yo, this is actually following this character through and through, despite taking a detour to Batman. I think the thing that a lot of people have, gotten upset about is that, hey, why is this first Flash movie going to be a Flashpoint movie? And I'm like, well, the first Flash movie is Justice League, and the only friends that he really has established is fucking Batman. So now all these people have to be in his orbit. And I think for a multiverse movie, which is a trend that I want to die as much as I really love the Spider-Verse movie. But, what works about Spider-Verse, what works about Everything Everywhere All at Once is that you can have a multiverse story. You can get as loopy as possible, but you got to have a great emotional spine. And I feel like this movie, I never felt any large looming questions with Barry's motivation to go back in time, especially it being in the plot of the movie as simple as, hey, what if I put an extra can of tomatoes in my mom's cart at a grocery store? And the repercussions of that are vast and huge and unexpected and break everything to insane levels. I thought Keaton was absolutely delightful as Batman. I thought Ezra was really good. It's the first time I've actually liked them in this role. Mind you, I'm grading it on a pretty big curve of this movie is putting a lot on their shoulders. And, they're anchoring talking to themselves for most of the movie. Most of the movie is interactions between themselves. What I really enjoyed about the movie is just the overall relatable message of accepting your life and your pain and that matters and not dwelling on what could be or what couldn't be. I also felt it was very relatable with what is it like to meet yourself when you're 18? It must be a fucking complete dumbass who ruins the world. I thought the action scenes were very, very, very competent. I thought that the script was solid. I like that there really isn't a villain to this movie. We can deliberate that in a little bit.
I mean, even in Flashpoint, as much as a Reverse Flash is the real big bad of that story, is the on paper big bad of that story, the real villain is Barry Allen.
Yeah. I thought that the second act of this movie is one of the strongest acts I've ever seen of a comic book movie in recent memory. I enjoyed the hey, we're going to make an origin story for the Flash, and then we're also going to do the sequel thing of what if the Flash doesn't have their powers? You know, like what would happen then? I thought the entire introduction of Michael Keaton's Batman was done late enough into the movie to where it didn't feel like he took over the entire movie, but it also didn't feel like Toby and Andrew, where it is just them getting a paycheck. I felt like Keaton actually had a narrative purpose to the movie, especially in explaining the overall stakes of the movie. And I generally really enjoyed it. With it's not perfect. There are a lot of issues, but we will get into those.
So I agree with you in some points. I loved Michael Keaton's portrayal of Batman in this movie. I liked that this, at its core, is a story about Barry Allen coming to terms with his own history and accepting the things that he can't change. What I don't agree with is a lot of the action scenes. I think if I had to describe the action in this movie, it's an A for effort, but a D- in execution, because the CG in this movie, it's distracting how bad it is. It looks like it's rendered on a GameCube.
I do think that the biggest issue to this movie, which I will say, this is not an issue that is unique to the Flash in this point in time.
It's not even an issue that's unique to Andy Muschietti's filmography, because this is the same problem that he's had in both of his It movies.
I have less of an issue with his It movies special effects than I did with the Flash. My overall takeaway is that it felt like a Zemeckis movie with all the good and all the bad of Zemeckis's career. I think Muschietti's comments saying that it was intentional that the CGI looked like this.
Yeah, I call cap.
I don't call cap, because it was very consistently bad in very specific areas. And I just think in general, he has bad instincts when it comes to the special effects. I also think any character that moves fast has been bodied by Quicksilver, who has, the scene in Days of Futures Past and even Apocalypse are the greatest uses of super speed in a movie.
Yeah, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. And yeah, I feel like we've gotten as much to an impasse as we can about The Flash without going into spoilers, which is going to be coming Monday with another friend of the show, Hunter, as a special guest. But to get to our final thoughts,
it's going to be a delight.
It's going to be delightful. I mean, it's a black man going as a white man. What could I do on June 10th?
Are we what was I about to say? Are we getting the Hunter from the multiverse where he gave it 4 stars?
The Hunt. I mean, aren't you the Hunter from the multiverse as it's giving us our peak?
I might be his reverse Flash.
But to get into our final thoughts, Nathan, so I don't know if you've been on the show in the last couple months, but we developed a new scale. So our lowest is a waste of film. Then it's skip it, burn it, stream it, tune in, peak. This is cinema. On that scale, what would you rank this movie and why?
I would say it's between a rent it or a tune in. I thought it was or stream it or whatever.
It's fine.
I think that of the superhero movies that have come out this year, this firmly sits pretty far in the middle. I liked Guardians of the Galaxy 3 a lot more. Obviously, Across the Spider-Verse handles a lot of the multiverse stuff a lot better than this. But I also, as much as I was not a fan of the CGI, it was not as distractingly horrible as Quantumania, a movie that I like more than most, but it's inexcusable. All the actors feel like they're at a set in Atlanta, just standing around in a parking lot. But I thought it was a good script. I thought it was a good action. I gave a shit about what happened to the characters, and I had a fun time, and I didn't really have that many complicated feelings about it, despite going in with a lot of complicated feelings.
Okay, Dusk, what did you think?
Without going into any of the negatives or any aspects I have about it, just taking it as it is. All things considered, I'd say it's a stream it. There's no reason for you to go to the theaters to watch this movie. I'm sorry, none of it justifies enough for it to be a big tentpole movie. I've also seen the other versions of Flash Paradox. I've seen the comic run. I've seen how the story can go, and this is woefully under the representation of what it could have been. And that's not necessarily the film's fault, but I have to hold it to a standard regardless. So yeah, this is a stream it. Or you can wait for YouTube and then watch all the Michael Keaton parts and the Supergirl parts, and you won't really miss much.
Yeah, so for me, I kind of echo a lot of the points that you have. I echo a lot of what I felt watching Suicide Squad in 2016, having seen Batman Assault on Arkham and how perfect of a Suicide Squad movie that was. And feeling like you had the template of what this story could be and you didn't do it. I see the absolute heights that the story could go with Justice League, the Flashpoint paradox, and you didn't do it in favor of just cramming in as many nostalgia bait, as many cameos, as many member berries as you could. But for as little of a part as that actually plays in the story, with everything else, especially with the emotional beats with Ezra Miller's Flash and his story about his accepting what he can't change, I just felt
Yeah.
I just felt very meh about this. And they just announced that Andy Muschietti is going to be the director for James Gunn's Batman Brave and the Bold. And seeing a lot of that, and I don't necessarily blame him for how this movie turned out. I mean,
no,
this
was a monster.
This was about as big of a Frankenstein's monster of a movie as you could have, about as many different production woes, as many different scripts, as many different stories, as many different versions of this movie that came together into this final product. I'd be more interested in seeing the documentary about the production of this movie than the movie itself. I just felt very bleh about this. This is a skip it for me. For as great of multiverse stories as we've gotten with films like Everything Everywhere All at Once, with Across the Spider-Verse, and I'll say even with No Way Home, at least with that movie, the nostalgia and the cameos in that movie, they played a part in that movie's story versus just, hey, remember this?
I could not disagree more, but I'll get past that.
Even, and this is going to be a slight spoiler, at least in context, even with something like Rogue One with Grand Moff Tarkin, how they recreated him with CGI. At least that was a character that played a part in the story versus just, hey, remember this?
Oh. You know what? I'm changing it. You know what? You've convinced me. No, this is a skip it. I'm going down. I'm going to skip it. No. As I'm thinking about it, as I was sitting in that theater watching that and going, I almost felt offended, almost in that last moment of being like, but the rest of the movie carried on and it did its thing. It's like, well, if you want to watch this stream, but you know what? No, because, and you know what? Even with Grand Moff Tarkin, he didn't even have to be in that movie at all. They didn't even have to have him in there, but they did, and they tried to do something with him. I wouldn't have advised that because I was foolish from the get-go, but they did it anyways. But yeah, in this one, they just puts things in there to be like, oh man, look what you're affecting these other products that we own because we're WB. And like, no. Yeah, this is a god damn. Yeah, this is a skip it. No. Yeah.
You've convinced me. I'm actually adding this to my Sight and Sound ballot for best movies of the 2020.
Go for it. You go right for it, and no one will ever respect your opinion again.
You do you, bro.
People don't respect my opinion.
Okay. Well, it was nice having you on. Bye.
Yeah. I guess I might actually be dipping after this point, but yeah. Zoom out of here.
that was our review of The Flash. Nathan, tell the people where they can find you if you are in fact dipping.
Yeah. You can basically find me on Twitter at Nathan Flynn, Nathan Flynn. You can see the way how my name is spelled over there. Can't believe I got that username.
Hey.
And then you can find my podcast, which has been delayed for a long period of time, but we're definitely coming back with a little bit of content coming within the next couple months. Mission Impodible, Impodible. Is how that's spelled, and we cover the Mission Impossible franchise. And fucking Dead Reckoning. Come on, let's go.
Mm-hmm. I'm right there with you, bro.
Well, it was a pleasure. I'm gonna leave the Speed Force.
Yeah, go for it.
Good to meet you, Dusk.
Yeah, nice meeting you too, boss.